let me ask you this. So does the president talk off the record to many of the people that he criticizes and calls the fake media?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've recounted some of my conversations with him. There was one that began as an off-the-record conversation, and then he gave me permission to use. He is incredibly. I mean, he's gotten mad at me behind the scenes too, so it's not purely consistent. But he praises me to his friends, and then he'll come out like right after and blast me in front of the cameras. I know for a fact he does this with Maggie Haberman, who's a really solid reporter who really gets Trump probably better than just about anybody. And Trump has attacked her in personal, vicious ways, especially on Twitter. And he has talked to Maggie Haberman more over the past, during his time as president than probably just about anybody in news, and probably more than many of his advisors. Okay, he respects Maggie Haberman. He knows she's a good reporter. He also believes that he can score points by attacking her.
Right. So to be clear, the very people by name that the president is saying are fake news, are bad for the country, enemies of the people, he is talking to them off the record, giving them information, trying to spin stories, being friendly, and then turning around and claiming that they're the worst people who've ever walked on the earth.
I recount a scene in the midterm elections, right before the midterms in 2018, where I found myself in the middle of a rally in Fort Myers, Florida, at the Hertz Arena, nearly 10,000 people packed with Trump supporters, right? And he leads this vicious attack. It's one of the harshest attacks I had heard him do on the press, blaming us for division, hate in our country. It was really over the top. And he gets the crowd to all turn to where I am standing and my fellow reporters are standing and hissing at us, chanting profanities at us. And the amazing thing about that event, as jarring as it was, is just minutes earlier, I had been backstage with him in the Hertz Arena in Fort Myers. I did an interview with him backstage right before he came out. And after the interview was over, he brought me into a holding room where Ron DeSantis was there, running for governor at the time of Florida, with his wife, Rick Scott, who was the current governor running for Senate, and his wife were back there and a few other people. He brings me into the room, and he says, I want you guys to meet the great Jonathan Karl of ABC News. I mean, those were his exact words. Over the top, oh, my God, look at this guy. He's the greatest. We just did an interview. And then he asks me 3 times before I left, are you going to go out and watch my speech? It's going to be a really good one. You got to come out and watch. You're going to love it. And I go out, and it was right at the top of the speech where he launches into this, personal attack. I mean, you can't make it up.
But I mean, look, that sounds like you're saying he's a fraud.
Well, I wouldn't use that word, but I mean, what I'm just saying that I think that among the fakest things out there right now are the president's attack on fake news, and he is somebody who aggressively courts the media. Now, he is thin-skinned, and he does believe that the media coverage has been relentlessly negative, and frankly, I think he has a point on that. He thinks that people ignore his in the news media and mainstream news media, ignore his accomplishments and harp on what he believes are trivial things that are distorted. But the bottom line is, this is somebody who watches more television news than probably just about anybody alive, let alone any other major political figure. He reads. He is an avid reader of the New York Times, and he does read the paper. He claims he cancels his subscription to the Washington Post, and yet he finds a way to talk about stuff the Post reports rather consistently. So it is not genuine, his attacks on the press. he is more of a consumer of news than any president I've covered. He's my fourth president, and I've never seen somebody who more closely watches what we report than he does.
All right, we got a lot of people. I know you can only stay until 2:30. We got a lot of people want to ask you questions. So all of you, I'm going to ask you to try and make these pretty quick so we can get to as many of them as possible. Let's go to line 4, Anthony in Albany, New York. Anthony, how you doing? What do you got for Jonathan Karl?
Hey, Jonathan, just really quickly, obviously from the last 10 minutes, you're not a big fan of the president, which is cool. But I'm asking is you and other people in the press room, do you find yourself in the way you ask him questions any different than you would address it, say, with President Obama, Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, or somebody maybe that you're more in line with their views?
Well, I'm not necessarily aligned or not aligned with anybody's. I try to put my views are irrelevant when I'm asking questions. But with anybody you are questioning, at least for me, I'm trying to ask a question in a way that's going to get a notable response, something that's going to have some useful information, and there are different ways you approach him. With Donald Trump, you've got to ask short questions. You cannot have a lot of background information. So and so reported this, and this report said that, and because he's going to cut through all that, and he's only going to seize on the last words that you said. So there are different ways, and I can predict a lot about how he's going to act. I can't always predict what's going to set him off. I did not think he was going to go into that tirade simply because, I was trying to follow up on this Inspector General report. It wasn't a hostile question. I wasn't trying to provoke him. Trust me, and go back and look at it. I was not trying to provoke him. Just like, he called me this "don't be a cutie pie" thing. You had this other outburst on Friday at me, and I was simply asking if he was going to be able to assure governors and hospitals that there would be enough ventilators. That was a basic and obvious question, and a short question, and it still set him off.
And I want to just make a personal note here, which is that, I have a site called Mediaite.com, and I have one of my liberal writers a few years ago used to have an obsession with Jonathan Karl. He was
right.
he was obsessed with him and was convinced he was a hardcore Republican. He was a hardcore Bush supporter. He was so on Jonathan Karl. It was like I had a Jonathan Karl reporter, and all he wanted to do was prove that Jonathan Karl was in the tank for the Republicans all the time. So I'd be careful in your judgments about people.
Well,
as you go ahead, Jonathan.
Not necessarily.
Anthony, go ahead.
It's not necessarily a judgment; it's an observation. And I'm not singling you out, but I do watch a lot. I watch ABC a lot. I know both of you, have a lot of time with ABC, and what you just said too about the negative reporting. That's very, from an objective person's position, that's more than evident that the reporting against him, especially on ABC, is almost.
Well, it's not especially on ABC. It's not especially on ABC.
Negative. Well,
it's not especially
with some of the mainstream media outlets, but
but see, the problem with that is it doesn't force the president to take any responsibility. It's as if all things are equal, and the media has decided to go after Donald Trump. I assure you, Bill Clinton hated the media. He was furious at the media. Sure. He felt that they were obsessed with his, this affair that I had, et cetera. Yeah, presidents don't like coverage sometimes. But it's not because people at the media are all out to get him, et cetera. Every president feels they're out to get him. Anthony, I want to take some other calls. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Let's go to Steve from Atlanta on line 5. Stephen, how you doing? What do you got?
Hey, thank you for taking my call, Dan. Mr. Karl, I'm just a really quick question. I'm trying to figure out why or how White House reporters can't call the president out for obvious mistruths in the moment. He lies so often and so directly. Why can't somebody say, that's not true, Mr. President? That's not true. I don't understand.
Well, I actually don't agree with you, with your analysis of this. I have frequently myself have corrected things that he has said in real time, and I've seen my colleagues do it. It is, you can't shout when he's in the middle of something and pull like a Joe Wilson and say you lie. That would be problematic. But I do think that fact checking has become a huge part of the job of a White House reporter. It's always an important job, but in this administration. Go ahead.
You just said you wouldn't use the word "you're a fraud." fraud. Why not? That's exactly what he's doing. That's exactly what you're saying.
I mean, I'll tell you why, because it's a charged word, and I'll let somebody else make the judgment. I will give you all the evidence in the world if you want to call him a fraud. You can cite all the reporting that I have, and you'll probably have ample material to do that. But it's not my job. I frankly rarely use the word lie because there's like an emotion. It's emotionally charged, and it implies intentional deception, and in some cases that may well be the case. In some cases, it may not be. But he also talks over you. So if you listen to the clip that Dan played, when he's like saying, "Aha!" on the previous administration, what I'm saying, and it's hard to hear because he rolls over you, is but this Inspector General became Inspector General under you, and then we said, well, Obama, and I said everybody on that stage, besides you and Pence, worked in the Obama administration. You know, Birx and the Admiral and Fauci, they all worked in the previous administration in government. So that's not like, but it's it's a challenger in real time. He's the president. He has the podium. He has the microphone. But I do think that I know I do that and try to do that, and I think a number of my colleagues do as well.
Thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Let's go to Jeff from Florida on line 6. Jeff, how you doing? What do you got?
Hey, doing well, guys. Jonathan, so I was just curious about whether or not the president is more his personality that affects his reactions versus whether or not it's a strategy. And as far as, conservative media, does he take his talking points from them, or do they cover for him after the fact?
There's definitely a symbiotic relationship there regarding the talking points. You hear him echoing things and explicitly on his Twitter feed that he's just seen in the conservative media. You can just watch his direct quotes from Fox and Friends, but from other outlets on the right. So there's definitely a back and forth. And what was your first question?
Whether or not it was calculated or just his personality. Was it a strategy to use the media as a foil, or is that just his natural reaction to "you can't blame me for anything"?
He told Leslie Stahl during the 2016 campaign. She challenged him, saying, "Why do you do these media attacks? It's tiresome, and you don't really believe it." He said, "I do it so when you do a negative story on me, they won't believe me." So I think that was the initial impulse, but he realized that his supporters loved the attacks on the media, cheered them on, and it became. So I think that part of it is he's got this. He sees this whole thing as kind of this real-time reality TV show, I believe. And the media are the perfect villain. Attacking them helps inoculate himself against bad, negative stories, and it's something that his fans will cheer loudly for.
All right, Jonathan, I know you got to go, so let me take one more quick call here. Let's go to Joe from Ohio on line 3. Joe, how you doing? What do you got?
I'm good. Thank you, Dan. Since I've been around, I've never seen presidents treat the press the way they do, the way Trump does. It seems like there's always been pretty good relationships in the past, although I'm sure presidents don't always like the press. But this president has basically abused the press, called them names. Has the press corps ever thought about, when this occurs, just to walk out? I mean, everyone walk out and not give him an audience?
Yeah, this suggestion comes up. I would never do that. I think it's our job to report and report aggressively on this, and I think we can have a debate about whether or not you should pull the plug on the live, press conferences, carrying them live. But I believe that as a White House reporter, it's my duty to be there to ask him questions, ask questions of his team, of task force, of all of that. I believe it's absolutely essential. And let me be perfectly clear on my view on the personal attacks, because you're right. First of all, every president complains bitterly about the press. And Dan mentioned this about Clinton. It was also very much true of Barack Obama, who many people might find surprising, but he believes that particularly the White House press corps was relentlessly negative and unfair to him and did not see or talk about his accomplishments. I mean, very similar view to Donald Trump, but Obama never did it never made the complaints